Welcome to Baptist Press This Week, sponsored by the College at Southeastern. I'm Brandon Porter. Dr. Willie McLaurin served for many years with the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board before coming to serve at the Southern Baptist Convention's Executive Committee. In this episode of Baptist Press This Week, we talked to him about the importance of state conventions, regional conventions, and how they are impacting the kingdom for Christ. Stay with us. Dr. McLaurin, thanks so much for joining us for Baptist Press This Week.
It's a joy to be here, Brandon. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this strategic gathering.
Dr. McLaurin, you served for a number of years with the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board before coming to the EC. Would you talk to us a little bit about what you did for Tennessee Baptists?
Certainly, Brandon. One of the greatest joys of my life was serving with the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board. In fact, I invested 15 years of my ministry, serving the churches across the Tennessee Baptist Convention. Initially, they hired me as a leadership specialist, which was essentially the guy that assisted churches in developing existing and emerging leaders. And so that was a tremendous joy just to connect with churches and help them grow their leaders. And then along with that assignment, I had an assignment called Harvest Field Team Leader. And Harvest Field Team Leader was a team member that was responsible for serving a region of the state. And so my region was all the West Tennessee, and that region had about 369 churches and about 15 associations. And so I had the joy of serving those churches really for three things. We wanted to be on site in order that we can gain insight. We wanted to have intimate knowledge about what's happening in churches. We wanted to have a place where we can have strategic partnerships. And then we wanted to be able to find a place where we can have some measurable results. And then I had a couple of other jobs. I was the Black Church Development leader. I was the relations leader. And then Dr. Randy Davis came to serve as the new executive director in 2010. And about 4.5 years later, he asked me if I would serve as the special assistant to the executive director. And so my last 5 years serving with Tennessee Baptist, I had some executive leadership responsibilities. And so I was responsible for our staff development. We called it Focus Week. And so we planned a couple of those a year. But more importantly, my job was to help make sure that we stayed focused on our vision and our mission and our strategic priorities, and that we did not experience mission drift. And so it was an honor for me to be able to serve Tennessee Baptist. Tennessee Baptist is my home convention. I'm a member of a Tennessee Baptist church, and Randy Davis, who serves as the executive director, is my forever boss and mentor.
That's good. Talk a little bit about what you learned about churches cooperating through that work at the state convention.
Man, I got to see firsthand just the power of cooperation, particularly as I looked at my role as I was serving in a harvest field. I had a front row seat of watching churches work together. So a couple of things that happen. Number one, when churches are working together, there's a huge encouragement that takes place. I mean, discouragement is ministry enemy number one. And if the enemy can get pastors and churches discouraged, then he's got them right where he wants to be. But when churches cooperate together, there was a huge sense of encouragement. But then not only was there a huge sense of encouragement, but also got to see churches energized. I saw churches come together to do men's conferences in their region, women's conferences, evangelism conferences, because churches figured that they are better together and they're stronger together. And that all began with pastors who just started building relationships one with another. And those pastors began to build not only just friendships, but they built partnerships. And those pastors began praying together. And then those pastors brought their churches together to impact their community, because it's really about the kingdom. And so churches were encouraged and the churches were energized. But then the other thing I saw was, man, churches experienced a huge sense of empowerment because so many of our churches are still what I call normative churches. There are smaller membership churches, and there are certain events that they couldn't do by themselves. But when they partnered with like-minded churches, man, we begin to see God do some amazing things across our state and see God's name glorified.
Yeah, those are things, as I listen to you talk about those things, those are first things that I think churches could do that. On one hand, there's a question, I guess, of why should a state convention be needed to help churches come together? You know, pastors in a region come together. But the reality, you've been a pastor, I've been a pastor. The reality is we get so focused on our church and our local ministry field that sometimes it really is necessary for sort of a shepherding to happen outside of our local church so that we get together and start build relationships with those pastors that are around us. And really that's a place where the state convention can be a great help, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that we prioritized when I served at Tennessee was this idea of intimate relationships. And one of the things that we prioritized across our state was we had our team members going to where the churches are at. And our team members were sitting down with pastors and ministry leaders and associational leaders around the table and just breaking bread together, just spending time in fellowship, hearing the hearts of ministry leaders, hearing their stories, and really walking with ministry leaders through some of the difficult times of their life and of their ministry. Because, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And one of the things we want to make sure that we were there encouraging and supporting our churches. And we did not want the only time they saw us to be the time where we're asking for money. Mm-hmm. We wanted to come alongside them and just encourage them and just be their biggest cheerleaders as they're trying to make much of Jesus in their harvest field.
Yeah. And it's not just for pastors, it's for churches as well. I mean, there is a place for churches to get involved in their local or their state association, state convention, regional convention, those organizations, isn't there?
It really is. You know, one of the things that we've seen across our country is, particularly in the past recent years, there have been so many disasters that have taken place. And the state conventions, even though they give some leadership to disaster relief, it really is churches partnering together, putting on their yellow shirts and representing the Lord Jesus Christ with the label of their state, the label of their church, their association. And man, people come together for different walks of life. It's always interesting to see. You'll see medical professionals with blue collar workers, but they're all there in the name of Jesus, providing relief and providing the hope of Jesus. And man, that excites me. That energizes me. When I see that happening, it reminds me of what the Bible refers to as the kingdom of God. We're kingdom citizens, and God chooses to work through his church to accomplish his kingdom agenda. And so much of what we see across our state conventions and in local churches is an expression of the local church in trying to accomplish a greater mission, which is the kingdom agenda.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk some about that, about moving that up maybe to even a larger level, the way state conventions and regional conventions partner together with the national convention. So stay with us. We'll be back for more of Baptist Press This Week.
So here at the College of Southeastern, we are equipping students to give their lives for the cause of Christ in the church, among the nations, and in every aspect of society. So the College of Southeastern is not just a Bible college. While the Bible is the foundation for all of our degrees and even all of our courses, we're going to equip students in a variety of fields so that they can give their lives for the cause of Christ in any number of different ways.
And the context that we have here, the kind of education that we have here, is not a choosing between a really good education versus a Christian education. I think the best education possible is one that holds Christ at the center, who is the truth and the way and the life.
I would stack our graduates up against any university graduates. They really receive a well-rounded education, a tough education, but at the same time, really being filled up with learning to live out the gospel.
Truly, everything we do is to equip students to give their lives for Christ's cause in the church, among the nations, and every aspect of society. when you leave this place, you really do look more like Jesus. If you want your life to be that, then you need to be here.
Welcome back to Baptist Press This Week. Thanks to Dr. Willie McLaurin for joining us. He is the interim president and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention's Executive Committee. And we're talking about state conventions, and we've been talking about ways that churches work together. And one of those ways that you just talked about was through disaster relief. Now that's a great place to sort of pivot to the national convention as we think about those disaster relief teams and the trainings, and then they come together under the umbrella of Send Relief and are coordinated and sent out across the country. That may be the first thing that comes to most Southern Baptists' mind when they think about that cooperation. What are some other ways that the state conventions and the national convention work together?
You know, Brandon, I'm so glad you said that, because oftentimes when people think about cooperation or the cooperative program, they think about just the pass-through of money. And certainly we need every gift that comes from every church. But the cooperation is so much more than just the dollars that are passed through our state convention and that are moved on to the national. Many churches don't realize this, but the cooperative program, and as a gift of the cooperative program, is so much larger than just what they see happening nationally. One of the places of cooperation is so many of our state conventions, they receive cooperative program dollars, and there are so many value-added ministries that are taking place in our state conventions. And so one of the places that we practice cooperation is we try to eliminate duplication. So state conventions are on the front lines of providing Sunday school training, small group training, worship workshops for worship leaders, for trainings for folk who are serving as interim pastors, and just so many other pieces that are there. And so what happens on the national level is we've got some ministry assignments that have been given to us by our national convention. And one of the things that I'm seeing at a greater level now than ever before is that our national entities are intentionally collaborating with our state conventions. For instance, you've got the North American Mission Board. As they think about their church planning efforts, they are partnering with so many of our state conventions. And so that it's just like a hand in the glove, if you would, that state conventions and national entities are merging their efforts together to make sure that lost people are won to Jesus. And once they're won to Jesus, churches are planted, that those resources are provided for those churches to be planted so that they can multiply and grow and reach more people for Christ. And so I'm seeing that on a regular basis.
That's good. The fall, late summer, it's typically a time that state conventions have meetings and come together. Talk a little bit about what happens at those meetings.
Well, man, I tell you what, if you've never been to a state convention annual meeting, I want to personally invite you to come, whatever your state is, to this year to make it a priority. It should be within driving distance in your state. And so I want to encourage every pastor and every church to send their full slate of messengers to their state convention annual meeting. You know, by birth, I'm a North Carolina native, and so I'm proud to be a North Carolinian, and I'm proud of my home state. But now residing in Tennessee, I'm proud to be a Tennessean, and I'm proud to be a Tennessee Baptist, and I'm super pumped about what God's doing through the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board and Tennessee Baptist Convention. And my hope and my desire is that every state, that pastors and churches would be so excited about what God's doing in their state that they will make it a priority to attend their annual meetings. So several things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to have an opportunity to build some Great Commission relationships because people in general live geographically distant apart from one another. So they're going to be able to come together and build relationships around times of breaking bread together. Then they're going to be encouraged. Many of our state conventions, they began their gathering with a pastors' conference. I know in Tennessee actually begins their gathering with what they call the family reunion. And so on that Sunday night, they'll come together and they'll bring in an encouraging preacher. There'll be worship singing, and we'll all come together for kind of a family reunion service. And so I want to encourage folk to come and be a part of the pastors conference that's going to take place. And then you're going to get an opportunity to learn from others around the state. And just like the national convention, at the state convention, you're going to elect officers. You're going to elect your state convention president. You're going to elect people to serve on boards and committees that are going to steward the work of your state. And then one of the most important things that will happen is that together, the churches and the messengers that gather together, you'll actually approve a budget for missions and ministry just for your state. And man, that's really exciting right there. And the reason that that's exciting is because when you think about Acts 1 and 8 about being witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the othermost parts of the earth, man, right there at that state convention, you get an opportunity to be on the front lines of helping to approve that budget and to help make sure that ministry is advanced right there in your state. And then one of the most exciting things is you get an opportunity to make plans for the coming year. I'm always excited to hear from the state convention president as the state convention president gives the message. I'm also excited to hear from the executive director of each of those states that just give their report and just give an update on the work that's taking place. But then, Brandon, it would be incomplete unless who had mentioned that there will be microphones at the majority of our state conventions. And so just like you see happening at the national level, there'll be opportunity for people to come to a particular microphone, and they'll have an opportunity to introduce new business and make motions. Another thing that will happen is every state will have their own set of resolutions. Every state will have a resolutions committee, and you'll vote on resolutions that will take place. So just a number of things that will take place when you gather at your state convention annual meeting.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for this information. I believe it's going to be helpful to pastors and to those who they share it with and watch. Thank you for so many years of serving Tennessee Baptist, and certainly for what you're doing now, serving all Southern Baptists.
Thank you, Brandon. It's a joy.
Thanks for joining us for Baptist Press this week. Make sure to go to our website, baptistpress.com. There you can find lots of stories, and you can sign up for our morning and afternoon email. They'll come to your inbox every day, free of charge. Go visit at baptistpress.com.